Well, there was a bunch of really fat, lazy women in Bashan. And they were used to having their husbands cater to all their needs. In order for the husbands to afford all their drinking habits and eating habits, their husbands would go and take advantage of the poor in order to lavish on their wives a lot of food and drink. And Amos the prophet is not very happy with these. He calls them the fat cows of Bashan. They were the upper class ladies, and they were used to just sitting around, laying around, eating, drinking, gossiping, whatnot. And the men, instead of standing up to their wives, would do their bidding. And Amos was not very happy with them, so he calls these women a bunch of fat cows of Bashan, and which is a very descriptive term of what they wore. The men weren't much either. But we're in the Proverbs into the last of the 36 sayings. There were 30, then there were 6 in sayings. And this has to do with Proverbs' take on laziness. Okay? It's gonna be kind of interesting. So if you got your Bibles, you want to get them, we're gonna go through chapters 24, verses 30 to 34. Okay? Just 5 verses we're gonna look at. And while you do this, you may want to take notes, because in these 5 verses is a pattern or an outline how you can actually do inductive Bible study. Remember, inductive Bible study involves 3 things. It involves making observations on the text, looking to see what it says, what, when, where, how, what is the atmosphere like? What kind of genre is being used? How is it constructed? And then we do interpretation that asks the question, well, what does this mean? And then finally we get to the 3rd step of inductive Bible study. How can I apply this truth to my life? So let me read this to you. We're going to look at the first section is observations, second section, interpretation, third section, application. Okay? So let me read this to you. I pass by the field of a sluggard, and by the vineyard of a man lacking sense. And behold, it was completely overgrown with thistles. Its surface was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. When I saw, I reflected upon it. I looked and received instructions. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, then your poverty will come as a robber, and your want like an armed man. Notice the breakdown. First of all, in verses 30 to 31, you have observation. You have the wise man who designates himself as I, making an observation. He's watching this lazy, dull-witted individual while his field and his home and his business is being diminished because he's lazy. He says, I passed by the field of a sluggard. Now that word sluggard is used 13 times in Proverbs. And basically it means a lazy person. somebody that doesn't want to work. Okay, and we got a lot of those today. Okay, they're afraid of work. In fact, that's a greater disease to them than the COVID. If they go work, they feel like they're gonna get sick or something. Listen, work is one of the gifts of God that He's given us. Okay, so he says, I passed by the field of the sluggard. He's looking on. He's watching this as an observer. He's making an observation. And by the vineyard of a man lacking sense. Okay, this lazy person who lacks sense is dull-witted. He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Okay? He's the kind of guy that just sit back and he watches. He really doesn't. I want you to notice who's making the observation. The wise man or the sluggard? See, the wise man, right away, he makes an appraisal. He sums up the situation pretty well. I can come on a scene and I can pretty well tell if I'm in somebody's house and their house is a disaster. There's sinks piled up, dishes piled up in the sink. You don't even want to use the restroom. I mean, the yard is a mess. You know, you could pretty well say that's a lazy person. You know, it's interesting. But one of the head military officers, I think it was for the SEALs, and he gave a speech about discipline and hard work. And he says, you know, the greatest thing you can do every day is when you get up in the morning, make your bed. It'll give you a sense of accomplishment, and it'll give you a way of getting started. Okay? This lazy sluggard isn't going to make his bed. I mean, he's the kind of person that he'll put the sheets on and he'll say, well, why should I make my bed? I'm just going to get in it again. Okay? And so that's the way he thinks. Now, I've been in homes like that. They're disgusting. Okay? Now, when I'm talking about these fat women, they're not fat because of the fact that they're diabetic or they have health problems. They're fat because they eat too much and they're lazy. Okay? And they have husbands that cater. There's actually a picture of a woman. I saw it yesterday of a woman. She's about 700 pounds. And she married this real skinny guy. And the picture is him feeding her. You know, I don't understand that at all. You know, if I was married to a woman and she wanted me to do that to her, man, I'd tail out of there and hurry. I said, man, you need to find somebody else. I'm not going to feed you. Not like that. I'm not going to help you get obese. Okay? Well, that's what they get to this point where they're so lazy. And I'm going to show you their rationale in a minute. But anyway, this wise person's looking at this. He's looking at this scenario. And he said, man, this isn't going to be me. Okay? And then he says this. He says, he passed by the field of the sluggard and the vineyard of the man lacking. And behold, it was completely overgrown with thistles. And then it was covered with nettles. If you know what thistles and nettles are, those are not ornamental flowers. Thistles have like spines in them. Okay? You get in there, man, and it's just horrible. And they got little hair-like stuff, and they get all over you, and they stick in you, and those nettles and thistles. And you know that as he's looking at this, man, this thing has been there a long time. He hasn't gotten out his lawnmower. He doesn't use the weed eater. You know, he could at least gotten some goats that would have eaten all this stuff. But he hasn't. He's neglected his field. He's neglected his work. Okay? And then he also says, its surface was covered with nettles and its stone walls was broken down. His house needed maintenance. I've been in people's apartments and people's houses, and I can see that things need to be done, even businesses, even golf courses, where they neglect things as if they think they're somehow going to repair themselves, and they don't. And I look on the scene, and I just think, you know, they're lazy. And they're just flat out lazy. They don't want to handle responsibilities. Okay, so this wise man is looking. So he sees this scene. I can kind of vision this sluggard, whether it's man or woman, just sitting on the porch there on a rocking chair, not taking anything in. And he says, now we're going to get to the interpretation part. So the observation is what he saw. Okay, and you can kind of put an atmosphere there. I imagine if I was there looking on that scene, I probably would have been back there smiling and thinking, man, this is not going to end well for this person. And he said this, when I saw, I reflected upon it. This is an interpretation. He's thinking about it. What does this mean? And then I looked some more. You know, when I was in Bible college, the professor had us look up a verse. And he says, no, I want you to go home and make 25 observations on that verse. Oh, we went home, all the students, we're just struggling hard to come up with 25 observations. So we go to class the next time. He says, oh, man, that's great. Everybody read some of theirs and raised their hand. Yeah, I found this. Like you think you were really great. He says, okay, now I want you to go home and get 25 more from the same passage. What? We brought that in. Then he says, okay, now I want you to go get 25 more. And that went on for a while. You know that we found over 500 observations from one verse. Okay? People see, but they don't perceive. It's sort of like if you've been driving for hours and you've gone miles, 100 miles, and you don't remember anything. Okay? You saw, but you didn't get it. We need to learn to see and perceive. That's what a wise person does. Okay? They're able to look and see, make observations. Then they make interpretation. What does this mean? Okay, he says, when I saw, I reflected upon it, I looked and received instruction. And this is what he said. This is the rationale of the lazy person. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. I'll get to it tomorrow. I'm just going to take a little nap. I'll get up and then I'll do it. I see some of these housewives, you know what they do? They don't even really have to work, because my grandmother used to wash her clothes with a wash bin. Okay, and she'd wring it out. And she had a big pan with a scrub board. So these women, they throw all the laundry into the wash machine, wash it, they throw it all into a dryer, and then you roll everything out of the dryer on the couch or on a table. It was there for a week. They didn't finish the job. They didn't do anything to begin with except to throw it in and take it out. Okay, it's not like they had to scrub each and every little thing. And I see a lot of wives have that kind of habits. Okay, so he's saying here the rationale of the lazy person is, I'll get to it later. Just a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And you know what the problem with that is? A little bit becomes a lot. And you get a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. Next thing you know, you got this big old mountain of laundry you got to do. You got to take care of all this mess in your house. You got to cut all this grass. You got to take care of all this business at work that you didn't do. Okay? That little bit of procrastination. Okay? And so he's making this observation, and he says, that's the rationale of the lazy person. I'll get to it later. Just take a little nap right now, you know. And so they make themselves believe that they're eventually going to get around to it. Of course, they never do. And then when they do, it's so overwhelmed, so they got to get drunk in order to attend. They hire somebody else to do it. It was just what those lazy women were doing and that Amos was addressing. They didn't do any work. They had their wusses husbands that catered to their needs do everything. Okay? And then he says this, and now he's going to make application. Then your poverty will come as a robber, and your want like an armed man. What do we have there? We have a metaphor. Or it's called a simile, figure of speech. Now, listen to me, because here's where you get your meat. Whenever you have a figure of speech, you look at the image. That image, which is being used here, is one is a robber and an armed man. That's the image. That image represents what's called the non-image. What does it represent? Okay. What does an armed man and a robber do? Well, they hold you up. they leave you penniless. Okay, so you look at the image and you look at it, and then you make what's called the point of comparison. What does an armed man and a robber do? Well, they leave you destitute. They leave you, feeling violated. They leave you beat up. And what he did slowly, now something happened suddenly. And now he's in need, but because he didn't do his work, because he didn't fold those clothes and put them away, because he didn't make that oil change in his car, because he didn't take care of that little bit of maintenance in his house, because he didn't take care of that homework. The whole time I went to Bible school and seminary, I never once, not once, did I ever burn midnight oil. Never. And I would watch these other students, and they would stay up late at night, and they'd drag in the morning to do an exam or turn in the paper. And I'm observing. I went to Bible college and seminary. I never finished high school, so I observed that right off the bat. That isn't going to be me. So what I did was I took, they would give us syllabus, and I would take September, October, November, December, and I would print them out, and put these things up on my wall, and I'd write in when everything was due. And when I had a test coming up or something, and they gave you all the information, so I just put it all, I could get in my room and I look at my semester in a glance. And then I would just work it. And I played sports. I can remember just about every class I took, because it was profitable for me that way. But I went about it in that fashion. Now, there were others that were very lazy, procrastinating. In fact, the whole time I was in Bible college, you know what I did? And when I was at Dallas Bible College, I was the breakfast cook. And I'd make breakfast. There wasn't one woman that would show up for breakfast because they're in their dorms sleeping or putting on makeup or getting ready. So what I finally did is I put up a sign, and I said, there isn't a Proverbs 31 woman in this college. Because the Proverbs 31 woman gets up early. And all of a sudden, these women started coming for the breakfast. But the habits that you develop early on is what's going to carry truth here. That's why a military officer says, get up in the morning, make your bed. Okay? Develop habits, work habits. You always need to work. It's a gift to us from God. Okay, so we have an inductive study method process here. Observation, the wise man looks, he sees what the sluggard is doing. Interpretation, it teaches him about the rationale of a lazy person, about all that little. And he thinks about the application and the very little difference between an ordinary man and a great man. But that little difference makes all the difference in the world. You all have a great day. God bless you.